This is an old Celtic poem. To go to Rome is much of trouble, little of profit. The king whom you seek there, unless you bring him with you, you will not find. So again, to go to Rome is much of trouble and little of profit. The king whom you seek there, unless you bring him with you, you will not find. That's the essence of all pilgrimage. The true pilgrimage is conducted in the awareness that you are already at your destination. That your destination is in you. If you think you are actually going somewhere different from where you are or who you are, then it's not a pilgrimage, it's a package tour, or it's a diversion. And though yesterday I was talking about the early Irish monks, the Celtic monks, and the particular quality of Christian faith and Christian life that they embodied, which I think is a very contemporary kind of spirituality for our own needs today. And one of their strong characteristics is their love of pilgrimage. More than a love of pilgrimage. Pilgrimage, of course, was universal, much more widely practiced than it is now. We've replaced the package tour holiday with it, for it. If you go to India, you will still see pilgrimage in operation. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people travelling on pilgrimage. You see them, big groups of them on trains. They're wearing special clothes. They're sometimes carrying symbols of their journey, and it's part of the experience of travel. You don't see that in our airports, or people do go on pilgrimage, but not in those numbers or with that sense of integration. So it's worth, I think, reflecting on the meaning of pilgrimage for these early Irish monks. And some of the famous ones, famous Irish saints, speak to us across the centuries about the journey we are making here, these 10 days and daily in our meditation. They didn't only have a love of pilgrimage, they had a sense of a call to pilgrimage. And this was an asceticism for them. It was part of their training, part of their way of self-transcendence. The word asceticism is the word that has given us the word athlete. And an ascetic is somebody who practices, who gets up early in the morning and goes for a 10-mile run and works out and stays in condition, and that's their professional job, and which they also love doing. Whatever the weather's like, whatever mood they're in, this is their routine, this is their work. So the ascetic is somebody who has a spiritual athletic program, in a sense. Our daily meditation is our asceticism, our practice, our exercise. And but in addition to that, the pilgrimage was for those early monks a form of martyrdom. The early church, of course, had a great fascination and respect for the martyrs. The word martyr means a witness. People who witness to their faith. And just as when a young couple who've been living together for 5 years decide to get married and send out the invitations to the family and put on a big marriage show, that's what they're doing. They're witnessing to the world of what has happened in their love and their relationship, and the witnessing is a very important part of the relationship. It develops, of course, them and their relationship to others. So the martyr is somebody who witnesses to their faith, and the witnessing is a further deepening of their faith. It takes you to a new place when you witness to something. When you, as St. Paul says, it's not only believing in your heart, but confessing with your lips and living with your life as far as you can what you believe in and what your experience of faith is. So there are different kinds of martyrdom. Apart from the red martyrdom of getting yourself thrown to the lions and eaten up, there was the green martyrdom for the Irish monks, appropriately, which was to go and live in an isolated place and live a solitary life in nature. But there was also white martyrdom, which was voluntary exile or a perpetual pilgrimage. These were the peregrini. These were the monks who would spend all or a significant part of their lives travelling, moving on. The sort of classic archetype was they would get into a rudderless boat and just push off from shore and let the current take them. And this wasn't just irresponsibility. This was difficult. They loved their country, they loved their family, they loved their home, and this was a real sacrifice. This was a real renunciation. But it wasn't a negative one. It was obviously done for a purpose. It was to throw themselves more open to the experience of God that was already growing in them powerfully. One of the famous archetypal figures, legendary figure in this type of Celtic monasticism was St. Brendan, the navigator, one of the 12 apostles of Ireland, a 5th century monk whose exploits or whose adventures were written in the 9th century in a great beautiful work called The Voyage of St. Brendan. And it's a bit, at times, like an adventure story, or a story of like Sinbad the Sailor, or these sort of mythical tales. It's very entertaining and fascinating. But it is also deeply expressive of the inner journey and of the meaning of pilgrimage. Interestingly enough, he was, his great voyage lasted for 7 years, and he set off with 60 companions. And just before they were about to push off from the shore, 3 unbelievers arrived and asked to go with him. And he took them with him, and of course they came to believe in the end. And it's a nice detail in the story, I think, that he had chosen this number of 60 for symbolic reasons. So he accepted there was going to be something unpredictable, and he wasn't in control even of his own companions. There was an openness to something that was a little untidy or unsymmetrical. I think that's a very significant aspect of the journey, that even at the very beginning of the journey it doesn't work out exactly as you think it's going to. And you have to be open to that. If you don't adjust and adapt, it's not fully a pilgrimage. And there were great adventures on this journey, landing on an island that turned out to be a gigantic sea monster, and arriving at this isle of Elba, I think it's called, where the monks, there were a group of monks living there who were eating magic bread, magic loaves, and who lived in complete silence and did not age. An island where you did not age. Or there was an island full of grapes where they stayed for 40 days. An island where there were 3 choirs of anchorites, of hermits. One nice little adventure was when they was sailing across the Atlantic and they found Judas sitting on a cold, wet rock in the middle of the sea. And this was his day off from hell. Somehow the mercy of God even reached him there. They gave him 1 day a week. He got off from hell. Had to sit on this cold, wet rock. And on Sundays and feast days it was. He was allowed off. And Brendan sort of takes pity on him and protects Judas from the demons of hell for one night. So, a pilgrimage where there are adventures, there are always opportunities for compassion, and where you're always going to be surprised. If you find your life is boring, then you're not on pilgrimage. If you find your life is unsatisfying, you are not on pilgrimage. And then their quest is for the promised land of the saints, the Isle of the Blessed. And when they find it, they come home. Their cell during these 7 years, of course, was their boat, although they landed and stayed on different islands along the way, but their cell was their boat. This was what was carrying them. So in the same way, as I was saying yesterday, our cell is both the place where we are held anchored and centered, but it's also the vehicle that we are travelling in. And to be on pilgrimage means you have to understand both of these to be combined in the same thing, the anchor and the vehicle. He also is growing evidence, or speculation, I don't know, that the Celtic monks left Ireland and reached America, and I don't know how historically that stands now, but there's a strong. Certainly, it was physically possible because somebody built a boat exactly as they would have, which they would have used for these pilgrimages, and did sail it across the Atlantic, landed in Newfoundland quite safely and got back. So it was physically possible to do that. Let's just reflect for a moment about what a pilgrimage means. Father John speaks often about the pilgrimage of meditation. Pilgrimage is a journey. A journey involves an experience of departure, of moving from one place where we have become settled, which we may have come to call home, where we feel secure. But feeling secure is not enough. There is a deep restlessness within the human soul that pushes us to look for something more than security, more than safety, more than predictability. And this divine restlessness, let's say, is something that is creative in itself. It will lead us to growth. It will lead us to new expressions of life, a new sense of self. That's what creation does, creativity does. And if you repress creativity, what happens? You go bitter. The creativity becomes negative, becomes anger, becomes destructive energy. And creativity has to be released in a creative way. That means we cannot control it completely. I was talking to an artist the other day about his experience of meditation, and he said it's really the same thing that I do when I meditate as when I get into a work of art. And he said, if I go into the work of art knowing what I'm going to make, intending to produce something that's already in my imagination, then he said it doesn't work. It doesn't happen. So I have to go into this creative state not knowing exactly what's going to come out of it, or not knowing what kind of struggle it may be. It's pushing off from the shore and losing sight of the horizon. We don't find new lands without losing sight of the horizon, of the land, and setting off for a new horizon. And I was impressed by that, because although the work of painting is obviously different from the work of saying the mantra, they are both creative work, aspects of creative work, and therefore they can be compared in this way. A pilgrimage is a journey with a sense of departure, of letting go, of moving on. It's what we do every time we meditate. It's also a journey, of course, we make with hope. It's not just wandering in an aimless way, but it is moving into something unknown. But it's moving into the unknown with a sense of hope. And hope is not filled with imagination. Real hope is imageless but certain. As long as your hope is filled with imagination of what you're going to get or where you're going, then it's really still desire. You're still desiring something. You want something, you've got an image of what you want. But hope itself is imageless. But it puts you in touch with a sense of certainty, of clarity, and therefore a peace. A sense of peace that in fact you know, that you can't see, explain, or measure, or prove in the ordinary way, but there's a knowledge, there's a certainty, there's an inner experience, in other words. Now, to be on pilgrimage has a purpose. It's a quest. In all the literature, in all the great mythologies, we have stories, as in the Celtic legends, of people who go on a quest. And that's something we, in our time, I think, need to reflect on, because we are involved most of the time with problem solving and goal setting. And that's okay and necessary as far as it goes, but it's still quite a superficial way of responding to the meaning of life. That you have to decide what you want and go for it. Well, okay, that's maybe good if you need to do fundraising and you need to make some plans for the future. But we all know that things don't often work out exactly as we plan. So there's more to the journey of life as a pilgrimage than just goal setting and planning, or problem solving. What are we seeking? What is the quest for? Well, St. Benedict says when somebody comes to the community and asks if they can join and live there, he sort of implies you've got to make sure they're not just looking for a bed and 3 meals a day. You have to find out, do they truly seek God? Truly is the sort of little catchphrase there. Do they truly seek God? So the quest, we could say, is seeking God. But what on earth does that mean? Especially if we have an image of God, or a preconception, or a sense of a coming reward. That when I find God, then I will have what I'm looking for. What am I going to do? Well, actually, if we started to analyze what we mean by God, or by our desire for God, or our image of God, we would probably be humbled a little, because we would realize that actually what we mean by God is saturated with our desires, or our fantasy, or our imagination about what would make us happy, complete and fulfilled. So it isn't quite as obvious as we might think. It's a platitude to say, I want to do God's will. Or there's nothing else in life except to find God. But that's the best way we have, I think, to express the ultimate meaning of life as a quest, as a pilgrimage. And perhaps it's explained well by St. Gregory of Nyssa when he says that to seek God is to find God. He's echoing Jesus, who says to seek is to find. Whoever seeks will find, whoever knocks the door will be opened, whoever asks will receive. It's a fantastic affirmation of the quest aspect of life here. Jesus is pushing us out, putting us in the boat and saying, okay, push away now. You can just go, just do it. You'll be okay. You'll find you're not going to sink. But then Gregory of Nyssa adds something very important. To seek, he said, to seek God is to find God, but to find God is to seek God. So seeking will lead to finding, but finding is always and it's about seeking. This is something St. Paul says when he speaks about setting out on this journey. He says, I leave behind the past, that's finished and over with, and I set out, I reach forward, I stretch forward. The Greek word is epiktasis. I stretch forth to what lies ahead. And that's part of the meaning of pilgrimage, that we are constantly setting out and reaching out to whatever comes next, the next adventure. When you look, just look out of the window here for a moment. And try to focus on the window, on the glass itself. Find a little, actually they're so clean, aren't they? Well, they're not perfectly clean. So just focus on either the reflection you see on the window, or some marks or streaks on the glass. So you're looking at the window pane. And then take your attention off the glass and look beyond, look out at the horizon and the clouds sitting on top of the mountains there, all the grass, all the trees. And then go back to the glass, the window pane, And just feel the difference in terms of your perception. Do we focus on the window or what we see through the window? And what does it feel like? What does the difference feel like? St. Paul also says somewhere, there's a great film by Ingmar Bergman with the title, that in this life we can only see as through a glass darkly. So there's always some sense of distortion, perhaps. There's always the danger of focusing on the window rather than what is on the other side of the window. But the choice of where we focus, what we set our mind on, what we are allowing ourselves to perceive, that choice stays with us. It's part of the divine presence, really. It's part of the divine gift of freedom that we have. There are a few miracles in the Gospels where Jesus restores people blind, the sight of a blind man. And the two I'd ask you to remember are, first of all, Bartimaeus, the blind beggar, who's crying out on the side of the road, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus brings him over, has him brought over to him, and he says, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man instantly says, "I want to see again." And Jesus says, "Your faith has healed you. Go on." And his sight is restored. A very quick healing, very efficient, and time efficient, and no mumbo jumbo. It's just your faith has healed you. You know what you want, and you have connected with me, and here it is. Then there's another moment, another story, where a blind man asks to be healed, and Jesus puts his hands on him, and the man says, "I can." And Jesus says, "What can you see?" And the man says, I see people, I think, but they look like trees walking." So in other words, his sight is coming back slowly, but he's still, blurred vision. And then Jesus mixes a paste with his saliva and puts it on the man's eyes. And then his sight is restored completely. This is the only miracle story where Jesus cures in stages and also uses an extra medium of the paste. And I think these two stories are very complementary, because one emphasizes the instantaneous work of faith and the power of grace that can change our life within a second, and we are open to that. But the other one also recognizes that enlightenment comes by stages. In some Zen schools, there are some schools of instant enlightenment, which is focusing upon the moment where all illusions drop away and you see reality clearly in an instant. And another school of gradual enlightenment, which we might be more familiar with. So I think both of these are important for us to accommodate in our sense of our pilgrimage. The sense of immediacy, of being open to change now of the next adventure, and also that this is a long journey. And like any journey, there will be stages, and we live with a sense of incompleteness for a long time. If we can tune in to this sense of pilgrimage, we can see our life as this pilgrimage, then the frustrations, the losses, the disappointments of life take on a new meaning. And they even become purposeful. We see them, even while we suffer from them perhaps, as having a purpose. But as soon as we refocus on the problem solving or the desire fulfilling aspect of our lives, in other words, as soon as we start looking at the window again, we feel overwhelmed by the cares, the tribulations, and the storms of life. It all depends where we set our mind, where we focus. As we see in the stories of those Irish peregrini, the pilgrims, we share this quest of life with others. Even those monks at the top of Skelligat in the middle of the Atlantic were living in solitude together. And when we realize that we are sharing the quest with others, we realize that they also have the same sense as we do of searching for what is unnameable, ungraspable, invisible, and always beyond our understanding. If we don't have that sense of God, we run a huge risk. And it's the risk is that when we meet other seekers from travelling in different boats, we don't see them as fellow travellers, companions or soul friends, but we see them as enemies. In the enemy, perhaps we project what is hard about our own journey. In the enemy, we see that what we seek cannot be fully defined in our own terms, alone. And that is a huge and unsettling challenge to us. So to be truly on pilgrimage is to be ecumenical. It is to, maybe we don't travel in the same boat as other people, you can only get so many people in the boat, but you can wave at each other, and maybe the tide brings you close together. Maybe you can even travel in another person's boat for a while. To be able to see other seekers, other pilgrims in this way is essential for our own journey. Because we can't understand our own quest unless we see it in this big picture, unless we can see and respect other people's pilgrimage. In our friends, we find human companionship. In meeting other pilgrims, we actually find a taste, an experience of the goal of our quest. This was something the Irish monks understood very deeply and humanly. That although this is a solitary journey in the sense that no one can make it for you, at the same time, we find what we are looking for in the people that we are travelling with. That's community. That's the church, in fact. So, let me say this again. We're sharing the quest with others when we realize that we have the same sense of quest, of searching for what is unknowable, unnameable, ungraspable, and invisible. That's the closest we come to God. And I think our whole reading of Scripture is transformed when we read it in this light. Remember the prayer of Ephesians. With this in mind, I kneel in prayer to the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth takes its name, that out of the treasures of his glory he may grant you strength and power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that through faith Christ may dwell in your hearts in love. With deep roots and firm foundations, may you be strong to grasp with all God's people the height, the length, the depth and the breadth of the love of Christ, and to know it though it is beyond knowledge. And so you will come to fullness of being, the fullness of God himself. Well, consider those words in the light of this experience of pilgrimage, and you see that actually the quest penetrates and pervades everything. The height, the length, the depth and the breadth. There is no action, no thought, no sensation, no emotion that is not part of the quest. This was something the Irish monks expressed beautifully and powerfully in their poetry and in their prayers and in their love of nature. Yesterday was a really quite nice sunny day, and today it's a cloudy day, and the Irish monks loved this kind of weather as much as the sunny, glorious weather, beach weather. And that's a very important lesson for us, I think, to see that in every circumstance the quest is happening. If you feel discontented, then you have slipped off the boat, or you're slipping out of the boat, and you have to, and this a sense of acceptance and contentment is vital to maintaining the sense of pilgrimage. And only the pilgrimage gives you a sense of joy.